okay, you want to get some food. You can order it ahead of time online. You can download an app and order it. You can go to the place and you can order it from a kiosk, or you can go to a counter and maybe, if you're lucky, talk to an actual person.
For me, I'm going to order on that app every time. Yeah. Because, one, you get the coupon code. Two, you can take your sweet time. And I'm a picky eater, so I have to customize it, right? Does the sandwich have tomatoes? I don't want tomatoes. Does it have onions? I don't want onions, right? I want it to be meat and cheese the way God intended a sandwich. But also, I feel like the app gives you the opportunity to have one less problem with your order being made incorrectly.
Right.
Because if you talk to a person, you have to trust that they're paying attention, that they're hearing you properly, that they can actually hear what you're saying, and that they're going to type it correctly into the interface. So you've cut the opportunities for them to booger your order in half. And yet, today, what happened to you?
Oh, yeah. I ordered in person. Or no, I used the kiosk, and they made it wrong. And I had to wait and wait and wait. Yeah.
And you had to wait a long time. So you got a free cookie, which, I guess that makes it worth the wait. But that shoots my theory full of holes, doesn't it?
And that's why today's episode is sponsored by
Witch on South Limestone. You are listening to The Soapbox. I'm Paul.
And I'm Eric.
This all started out with a list. What's that all about?
So I've compiled a list over the years of things that just bother me, things that grind my gears. And I shared that list with you.
And I thought, you know what? That would make interesting conversation. Sometimes I'm going to want to agree with you, and it's just going to be something we talk about. Other times, though, I'm going to want to steel man the opposite position because I think that's just interesting conversation.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I'm always right, but Paul's just a really good debater.
Hey. You've thrown me off with your suggestion for the title, which I was going to say... I can't even remember what I was going to say. The tipping point. And then you wanted to call it
just
something else? Oh, yeah, just the tip. So, of course, we're not talking about anything other than gratuities.
Yeah.
And, it has become gratuitous in society. I don't think anybody disagrees with this. Yeah. But I would like to unpack a little bit. When is it appropriate? When is it not? And... should we even do this at all? Because I think there are people from other countries that think Americans are crazy.
Yeah.
And not just because, we don't use the metric system.
Yeah.
But I have been presented with the little square reader. Mm-hmm. And they'll say, what tip would you like to give? 15, 20, or 25%? Mm-hmm. And there's a lot to unpack there. So first of all, let's just talk about the appropriateness of when should you tip.
Yeah. Hey, maybe we should roll back a little bit before all the point-of-sale devices have kind of modernized this whole thing. But, back in the day, you go to the restaurant, someone's waiting on you, right? They're generally speaking getting paid below minimum wage. And we've kind of designed this system to where they're going to make more money and potentially make ends meet by getting this job and then being good at it, getting your food quickly and remembering your order and all the rest of it.
Being personable just being lucky and being attractive.
Yes. And then come time for the bill, growing up, I remember it was take 10% of the total and then add half of that, 15%.
Yes.
It was 15% for, it was 15% when I was starting to sign checks. So, I was, that was when I was going out. My parents weren't paying.
This is back in the old 1990s.
Yeah.
But that was sort of the expected amount. 15% said, I'm satisfied with the service. You did a good job. Transaction complete. Thank you.
Yes.
Right. And a tip was that. It was a thank you for good service.
Yeah.
And the whole design of the system, from the beginning, I think, is inherently flawed anyway, because why on earth would anybody sign on to make $3 an hour?
Right.
I think that's patently insane.
Mm-hmm.
I think minimum wage is a whole other discussion, but minimum wage is not kept up with the cost of goods and services.
Yeah.
We talk about wanting $15 an hour, and that conversation, that could be, I think, a whole other podcast.
Yeah, sure.
So we'll save that one. But the expectation is that tipping is how you get by, how you survive. And because of that, people have sort of tied receiving the tip with their own individual worth.
Yeah.
And now we've kind of created a problem, because there's this emerging new baseline assumption that if you exist and you have a job, you're entitled to compensation. You'll often see social media posts that will say things like, "Oh yeah, if you're too poor to leave 20%, then don't go out to eat," as if that's the onus is completely on the person that's patronizing the business, and not on the person that is there providing the service.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, because you can have a place that could sell food, slightly higher price than, like, say, fast food, and there's all kinds of variations in between here. You can have, my general rule is, if I go up to a counter, order my food and bring it to the table, that's a no tipping situation. There are exceptions, of course. But yeah, if you sit down and the table service and waiter and all that, I think that there's an expectation for a tip.
So let's talk about that, and we can come back to the amount that you tip.
Yeah.
But let's just talk about the appropriateness of the tip, because we're in a culture where that's always been a thing. I didn't get to vote on that on the onset of eating out, but the restaurant experience used to be, you would be seated, somebody would welcome you, they would talk to you about the specials, they would take a drink order, they would bring you the beverage, they would bring you your food, they were expected to do this in a timely fashion. They helped you through the ordering process. I'm a picky eater, so if I say, "Oh, what's on the such and such burger?" "Oh, well, I don't like the onion. Can you take the onion off?" That sort of thing. So all of this was like service being rendered.
Yeah.
They come check on you, refill your beverage so you're never thirsty while you're eating, give you more breadsticks or whatever the restaurant was known for, and the whole time they're waiting on you. They're making you feel good. At the end, they come collect your plate. They offer you dessert. You don't have to do anything but sit there for 30, 45 minutes. And at the end of it, you have been fully taken care of. You're not doing your own dishes, none of it.
Mm-hmm. Not even throwing stuff away.
That's the classic tipping scenario for me. But you start to look at faster and more modern iterations of a dining out experience. It's not like that in many places.
Yeah.
So to your point, you go order to counter.
Yeah.
What service is being provided when you're standing in line and they're standing at a register? They pushed a couple buttons.
But there it is. The thing pops up. Do you want a tip? And now, and this is probably its own a whole thing here. But the shaming that goes into it now.
Oh, you have to look them in the eyes.
Yeah. And I've heard different reactions from different people. Some people, like, you're ready to swipe your card or whatever, and you have to hit the red no button.
So they kind of give you an polite out.
Yeah. At other places, just flip that thing and be like,
yeah, they stare at you.
Mm-hmm. And you're like,
And I've had to sort of, because I'm a people pleaser, I've had to consciously sort of give myself permission to say, okay, well, why am I tipping when I haven't received my food yet? What if they mess my order up? What if it's really terrible? Or it takes them 30 minutes to come to me. Like, what am I actually tipping for here?
So I've done the same thing as a people pleaser too, for telemarketing calls. So I have the same kind of rule. I've just decided this person is making these calls, and outside of the fact I'd love to waste as much time as possible so that they're not getting other people.
Not like you've ever done that before.
Right. Episode 1. But I like to actually, if it's a legitimate thing, they're trying to sell or whatever, I'm just going to save you time. You're not going to get anything from me. I'm just going to keep saying no.
Yeah,
go to the next number.
Sometimes the rude thing's the polite thing, and they just don't realize it.
Yeah.
Spectrum guy at Kroger. Yeah. I'll go to Kroger. They want to sell me Spectrum. I didn't like my experience with Spectrum. I think I'd probably rather be punched in the face than have to switch to Spectrum. And every time I go to Kroger, hey, who's your internet service provider? Listen, I'm my wife needs feminine hygiene products. Don't talk to me. I don't want to be here.
Yeah, I'm with you where I'm in a. I've given myself permission to kind of be a jerk for those, and then, for the don't tip when it's clear nothing magical happened in our. Yeah, and I'm getting.
But there's a hybrid. There's an in between, right? Mm-hmm. There's not always just the fast food counter where you take your own trash out. Sometimes there's like that split model where maybe you order at the window, but they bring it out to you. Yeah. Maybe they pick up your trash. I say, like, feel it out. Mm-hmm. If somebody's coming to check on you, maybe they refill your drink for you. I don't mind to kick them a couple bucks for the effort, but I don't like the expectation. Yeah,
you almost need a, in here, point of sale device, right, is kind of what we're talking about. These devices, touch screens, take the credit card, feed the order, all that stuff. They need almost a way of having a post-meal option to tip. That would be different.
Like an Uber, right? You order your Uber, you pay. You
get your ride.
After the ride, it pops you
up. Yeah.
But there's perverse incentive in the design on these things because the Square readers, the one that I'm familiar with, but I'm sure there's others out there, they get a percentage of the transaction.
They do.
And so there's no incentive for them to reduce the tipping behavior. There's only incentive for them to increase the tipping behavior. And this is one of the reasons why I think you're seeing this propagate in society. The ones that are making the point of sale are incentivized to increase the sale dollars. Yeah. So they make it as easy as possible. Yeah. Tap to pay, dip the chips, slide the card, whatever, just to get the payment through.
Dip the chip?
Isn't that yeah, you dip the chip.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
This is how I've heard it framed. If that's weird or wrong, I just started something. Yeah. I mean, we led with just the tip, so
that's a good
just
point.
The tip, dip the chip.
Yeah, I got you.
So Square is going to make more money if you're tipping 20%, and so the retailer gets to select the amount, and there's a little bit of onus on them at that point because if you start at 20%, and you're saying how much do you want to tip? 20, 23, 27. Now there's scope creep here. Yeah. There's a creep in the amount of acceptable tipping.
We've missed an important iteration of this happening, and that was helping you with the math, right? So you get your receipt, you get your bill, and now instead of going to go 10% and then double or do the half, that's 10%. No one's tipping 18% because no one's doing the math. Now it says on the bottom of the check sometimes 20% is this, 25% is this. It's like, and again, it can kind of creep it up, and I'm sure they have the option to show this one or that one.
Yes. The other one, the one that makes me the most angry, is the obligatory tip. Where you're in a party of 6 or more, 8 or more, some places they'll say, "Oh, we've included an 18% gratuity." That's not what gratuity means. Yeah. When you've made me pay it, that's not a gratuity. I'm not gracious that I happen to be eating with an extended family today, and now I have to pay you 18%. And maybe your service sucks and you don't deserve it. You still get it. But I think the opposite of that is maybe just as offensive because it's kind of a gamble. If you take 18% out of my pocket without my consent, and I was going to tip 20, maybe 25%, now I'm not going to. Yeah, no, on principle.
Yeah, I have a principle too that if it's built in. Now some places are clever, and they don't add. They can read the room a little bit, and they're like, you know what, I'm going to treat these people well. I'm not like, and they'll even tell you like, oh yeah, you guys are 6 or more, but it won't be automatically applied. And that's when those are the big tippers.
Yeah. I've seen 2 other things that I think maybe are creeping into this conversation. One of them less recent, one of them more recent. The less recent one I think happened to me in 2022. I think it was 22. We were the first year that we went back to TRB after everything shut down during COVID.
You would have gone 2021. It was virtual. I think you went 2022 alone.
Yes, because it was bad weather and people were still nervous about COVID. That was like my first time going to DC, so I was excited enough that I just risked my own life, I guess. But while I was there was a handful of other folks that were there too, and we went out to eat, and I'd put them on blast if I could remember the name of the restaurant. It was some Italian restaurant in DC, and they had a COVID surcharge. And one of the guys in our party said, what is this COVID surcharge? And the waiter was, you could tell he'd fought this battle probably a dozen times that day already. He said, oh, yeah, because of this reduced number of people that are going out to eat, this is just to help our business stay afloat. And on principle, the guy we were with, he's like, listen, we're here. That is us doing that.
Yeah.
I don't want to pay an extra charge just because you don't have as many butts and seats. That's a you problem. That's not a me problem. Mm-hmm. If you feel like this needs to be here, increase the cost of your goods and services, but don't just add it as a line item surcharge. And he got it taken off. And good for him for doing that. But now I've seen in 2024, it's 2025 now, but last year I saw some places are putting an inflation surcharge with the same sort of principle. Mm-hmm. Our cost has gone up, and we want to bill you more. And people just completely miss the point.
Yeah.
If it's inflation, that's a forever number. It's not like, oh, well, goods and services are going to come back down just because we have a different butt in the seat of the White House. That's not how it's going to work. We have a new normal, and hopefully that new normal isn't escalating at the same rate as the old normal did. But just go ahead and increase your price. And this I think brings me full circle now to the whole tipping problem in America. And that is just increase your price. Mm-hmm. If it's an expectation that I'm going to have to pay a certain amount anyway, 18%, 20%, make my burger cost 18 to 20% more and pay your people a fair living wage.
Mm-hmm. I think in some restaurants have experimented with it, and obviously overseas is different. Tipping in Europe is basically leaving change, leaving just whatever.
Yeah, you don't want to carry around the extra euro in your pocket.
But I mean, you're talking, 50, 75 cents type of tipping. But yeah, I totally agree with you. I think it's a perverse incentive to use tipping as a way to make your employees do well, because I've seen it played out. I mean, people just stop caring. They realized I could, work my tail off and get that 22, 25%, or I could just do the bare minimum.
And I'm going to get 18.
I'm going to get 18, probably 20 again, because the math's easier.
Yes.
So it really is. And I get it. The 6 or more people, the automatic tipping, that's in place because you're going to work harder for a bigger group, obviously, filling more cups and all that. And it's their way of saying, we're not paying you enough. And if these people,
are going to be cheap,
we're
going to make sure they can't be.
Yeah. So I get it, but let's just shift the whole thing, and like you say, up the price of all the food, pay the people more, and then as an employer, just do your job as a manager. And if you're a bad waiter, get on the dishes or get rid of them. I mean, it's not my job to make sure your employees are doing a good job. I shouldn't use my pocketbook to do that. You should just manage your people well.
I think this is kind of spiraled out of control because I think in its earliest iteration, it made a lot of sense, right? It made sense. That was a good incentive. People worked hard for their money. But when culture has shifted to this place of entitlement, because if you do go back to like some of the social media posts, if you're too poor to pay 20%, stay home. At what point are you taking any degree of personal responsibility to say, you know what, I can control to some degree the amount of tips I'm going to get just based on my personality, right? Mm-hmm. And again, you've got notable exceptions where sometimes there's somebody that's just really attractive, and they're going to leverage that or whatever. But just on averages, if you work hard, if you're personable, if you keep somebody's cup full, if you make them feel good about being there, they're going to feel generous. Also, their tummy's full. Yeah. So they, one of their core needs, the HALT, acrostic, hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Mm-hmm. These are the 4 things that we need taken care of to be psychologically well off. Okay. Well, you've taken care of the very first one, hunger. Yeah. They should be at their most generous with a full tummy, and they should be feeling good about tipping you. So we do need to kind of pivot a little bit away from this culture of entitlement. But on the point of including the tip in the cost of the food, we now actually have one additional X factor that I don't know how this is going to play out, but it's going to re-incentivize tipping again. And I don't know how people politically are going to split on this because it hasn't happened yet, and both presidential candidates put this as part of their economic plan. But there's an understanding that folks aren't declaring their tips on their taxes. Mm-hmm. And rather than just sort of being complicit with everybody breaking the tax law, they're now saying, you know what, tips are no longer taxable. So this is true in Trump's plan. It was true in Harris's plan as well.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter what side of the political aisle you fall on. Both parties seem to support this notion. Do you think that if tipping is excluded from taxes, that now there's a different incentive structure?
I mean, possibly. I was actually gonna bring up Mr. Pink's. Was it Joe and Mr. Pink in Reservoir Dogs, right?
Okay, yeah.
I mean, the famous breakfast scene, and the meal. I don't remember what meal it was, but Steve Buscemi's sitting there chewing on his toothpick, and Joe's like, "Oh, who didn't put in?" And he's like, Mr. Pink, he doesn't believe in tipping. And he's like, "That's right, I paid for your GD breakfast. You throw your tip in," and then he's like, "Okay, general principle, I wouldn't tip, but since you paid, I don't care about." Anyway, I'm not trying to quote the whole movie, but the idea there, they were having quite a back and forth with Mr. Pink, a kind of a really neat exchange of arguing what we're talking about. And granted, this is the '90s and things have changed, but I think the principle they were talking about is the single mom working 2 jobs was able to get by because, again, she's personable and maybe easy on the eyes or whatever, but worked hard at it and used those tips to get by. And because they were not paying taxes on it, it was kind of like a loophole or obviously
like an unintended subsidy or something.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. A subsidy that everyone kind of looked the other way. We knew you didn't really make $1,000 in tips. You made it more, but we can't prove it or whatever. And wink, wink. You're getting by. This is, and they threw out a statistic in the movie. I don't know if that's still true now, but I gotta imagine there was a demographic of folk that they kind of needed this. So that has probably caused this to last as long as it has.
I would argue, though, that, I don't know how you tip. I usually use the line on the receipt and pay with plastic, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, that's the other thing, too.
So you can't avoid taxes on something where there's a record of it.
Yeah.
So if you're not tipping in cash, then regardless of whether you think that's a moral or immoral or amoral practice, if you believe that dodging taxes is good for certain people, the whole is it okay to steal to eat mentality, the Jean Valjean of digital payment, then you better be tipping in cash, otherwise they're going to have to pay for it anyway. I do dinner detective, and I'm acting in this murder mystery theater where there's tipping that occurs, but they have to have a record of the tips. So the tips all go to one central person. Mm-hmm. There's a record made of what's tipped, then it's evenly distributed, but then at the end of the year we get a tax statement where we have to actually pay taxes on those tips. And because we're contract employees, we're not employees of Dinner Detective necessarily, they also don't have withholdings. And so that's a tax liability for me. That's not a benefit. So I have to account for that over the course of the year. And it's not, I'm not doing it a lot, so it's not a huge amount. But if you're really counting on that, then you have to think about that.
Well, and I suspect that's kind of what maybe has happened with both presidential candidates putting it in. 10, 15 years ago, a lot of cash tips. It was working well. That's been declining as people have been going to Apple Pay and or credit cards in general, and then all the Apple Pays and things like that. So I bet cash tips have really, really dropped. So people have been paying taxes on there. So
it's probably inconsequential at this point, and it's an easy enough item to throw on there where people are going to get behind that because they feel like it's going to be more impactful than it actually is.
And I think I would dare say that if it does go into effect, you're going to see a lot of, like you said, kind of a subsidized job opportunity that people could, they could take for the same wage they're doing it now, and it's basically just going to increase because they won't pay the taxes. So I see it as a really good thing as long as tipping continues the way it is, I'm afraid there's this tipping fatigue. And the one thing we haven't talked about, maybe we can try this for a minute. Bartender tip.
Yeah.
Now you've got people drinking. Thought they were bad at math before. Wait till the end of the night, closing time, or you leave your credit card at the bar, your tab open,
automatically charge you. Yeah, what is it, 20%?
So I mean, now here's the question: are you paying 20% when you go to a bar and you're getting like nice whiskeys or expensive beers?
That one's always confused me, and I've got a couple of bartender friends who might shame me for having any opinion other than tip your bartender, tip them well, and tip them often. But if you're just thinking of it as a function of labor, my drink of choice, if I'm anywhere, my house or out with friends, is always the same. It's always bottom shelf whiskey, bourbon on the rocks. So it consists of put ice in glass, pour liquid in glass, transaction complete.
Hey, they got to measure it.
They don't do a good job of it.
The good ones don't measure.
Let me put Embassy Suites in D.C. on blast. Your double is a single, and you people are terrible.
Yeah, well.
But, so functionally, from a work standpoint, they did the same thing that a waiter would do a dozen times, filling up my water, plus bringing me food, plus taking my order, plus cleaning up my garbage, the whole nine. So why is it that they're getting 20% on my bar tab for something that is substantially less in my case? Now, I understand you make a cocktail and you got to twirl the little shaker and do your little dance, and you become the hibachi chef of alcoholism.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, maybe there's a skill or there's something that merits the additional tip.
I feel like the hibachi chef is the bartender of Asian food.
Yeah, a little bit.
Anyway.
They do the sake squeezer and they hit you in the mouth with it. So maybe if my bartender were to be like, "Hey, whiskey squeezer, open your mouth, catch a shrimp." I
get free shrimp at hibachi. What did I get with you?
Yeah, peanuts.
That's true.
So yeah, I equate money with value, and I ask myself the question, what is the value being added in this circumstance? And I'm sorry, but your human value, your value of I'm an employee, I exist, therefore I am entitled to something, is not part of my math.
So I got you there in a special context. So this is one of those, yes, but, right? I frequent Marika's. It's a German restaurant and bar in Lexington.
Let me reframe that. It is a volleyball place that has a German restaurant.
This is true.
Yeah.
It used to be just the German restaurant, and they had a bar, and then it became a German restaurant with a big bar, and then they threw a volleyball net out back.
Now the German restaurant is separate from the bar, and it's like a volleyball complex.
It really is, and it's a hoot, and it got me through COVID because we could play volleyball outside, wore your mask inside. It was a joke, really, but I got to do things once, twice a week. And so I'm there pretty regularly. Volleyball league, not just drinking. Well, okay.
Drinking league, not just volleyball.
And so what's happened there over the 5, 6, 7 years or so I've been going is the bartenders know me. And you can't be a cheap tipper in a situation like that. And it's an investment, in my opinion. So the value you're talking about, I tip well. I usually get a drink or two, and I'm there for 2 hours, maybe 3 if I do another pickup game. And generally speaking, when I walk up to the bar, this is the kind of place where
everybody knows your name.
There are no defined lines, right? And nobody pays attention to the rule about you're supposed to have the little area that's kind of separated with these like metal bars. It's supposed to be the drink pickup station for. And they don't even have waiters. I don't know why they have them, but you're not supposed to stand there. And there are 2 cash registers, and it's the wild west. So if you're not familiar with the place, you can stand up there for a long time before you get service. I can walk in the front door, and
they're already pouring your drink.
They're looking at me, making sure I'm not doing water because I got to play 6 volleyball games in a row. But they'll be like, you know? I'm like, yep. And I will get good, healthy pours there. I will get great service. sometimes I feel bad. I get up there and I just got there and I see this person that has been there a while struggling to know where to stand, how to get service, and they'll come to me and I'll be like, I think this guy's,
But I think what you're describing is exactly what this is designed for,
yes.
right?
Yeah,
you're getting great service.
Yeah.
You're paying a little bit more to incentivize that great service, and consequently, you're kind of a VIP, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's it.
Yeah.
Now, for somebody that's never been there before, they show up, they stand in line a long time. Are they tipping the same amount that you're tipping when their service has been not nearly as good?
They might be.
Maybe they are, but is that the expectation?
Yeah. No, and I think that's where I'm not sure. Like if the NBC Suites, right? A lot of times I will tip if I have cash.
Yeah.
I didn't have cash with me. It's really hard to tip.
I tipped the first night, and I got like
bad
terrible
pours.
service, bad pours the whole time.
Yeah.
I didn't tip after that.
And that's fair. I think that's what happens is you go to a bar and you're never going to go to this bar ever again. Maybe you don't have to tip great. Maybe you don't want to tip great. Maybe you should. I don't know. I'm generally pretty. I'm pretty, but generally
I'm generally pretty.
I'm pretty generous with tips, even with the bar tab, and maybe it's a habit. I don't know.
Well, I think at the end of the day, we're not going to come up with simple solutions to this problem, but I feel good about tipping in some contexts, and I think sometimes I'm going to be a stodgy old man and say, you know what, take a shot. I'm not going to tip for crappy service. I'm not going to tip just because you're here.
I would love to see a return, because I imagine, and again, I was, I was only playing this game, as a college student, because, when I really first started going out and signing the receipt myself. But I imagine there was a time like the old-fashioned diners and things where you really could use your tip to inform behavior.
Yeah.
Like you could leave a bad tip and that, that person got
the message.
Yeah, I got to do better. I don't feel like that's around anymore. I think it's a faux pas.
I don't think people take it seriously. I've seen people write in their in the tip, bad service or something like that. Don't call my husband honey.
Put a negative value in there.
Yeah, the Uno reverse card. Now you have to tip me.
Right. Yeah.
So I think it has been abused to the point where maybe it doesn't have meaning, and maybe it doesn't have meaning because some people have just grown up in a culture where they don't understand what its function was. Mm-hmm. This is vestigial transaction, and nowadays it's just, this is my income. How dare you?
Yeah. I would patronize a business in town if they, did a whole no tip in here, please. And I feel like, I don't think I'm not aware of one in Lexington, but I would patronize that place.
Yeah. Well, that's all I've got. You want to put a wrap on that?
I do. You have something funny?
Well, I was just going to ask if you wanted to tip 20% for this great podcast.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean, just the tip, though.
Thanks for listening to The Soapbox. Eric, how can people find us?
Well, conveniently, we put everything on our Linktree site. You can go to Linktree, search SoapBox Lex, and you'll find all of our socials there, plus ways to reach us, ways to engage, and some of our original content, so you can see some of the other stuff that we do.